know people will get worried when they see me with a microphone. So thank you. Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for your leadership. Great work, great collaborative effort. And I'll be back next month for our Energy Summit, but I really appreciate the invite to welcome the moderator and the esteemed panelists. You know, our organization is really focused on balanced opportunities for business. And what a great county. I just found out this morning we're ranked #1 for ag production in the U.S. There you go. We beat Fresno. I'm sorry, people here from Fresno. But we're #1, $8.3 billion. Check LinkedIn. And also talk about energy, right? 70% of the state's oil and gas, 60% of renewable energy. So thank you, everybody. KCCD, all your incredible work. I have a lot of factoids, but I want to introduce our moderator. And I did look on LinkedIn, so I told Lance he just got his EMBA, so that's not on your LinkedIn profile yet, but you did have a good cap and gown ceremony. Lance, speaking of manufacturing, we just actually launched the MAC, Manufacturing Alliance of Kern, and that's led by manufacturers, promoting manufacturing in our county as part of the B3K Prosperity Initiative. And what Lance does day to day is really critical, promoting manufacturing and technology. He is the president and CEO of the California Manufacturing Technology Association, and they actually work with over 30,000 manufacturers to promote growth in the state. We talk about site selection factors. It's about growing as well as recruiting, and he focuses on building that strong business climate. And I'm sure about the collaborations between business, education, and government. And they've been around since 1918. And they work, again, on that coalition building and the promotion of an industry that has amazing wages as well as upward mobility, opportunities, and multipliers. So Lance has been the head of the CMTA for 4 years. He's had several leadership positions with Miller Coors. Now, growing up in North Carolina, the dream of everybody over 21, or at the time 18, was to have Coors. On the East Coast, it was so rare. So, what a reputable company and just brand, right? Brand value, much like Kern County, we try to build the brand and support opportunities. So he had over 15 years with Miller Coors. Then before that, he was with the California Grocers Association. And then he's also worked the state legislature in '89 for basically a decade, chief consultant. So he's worn many hats. He understands the needs of all sides, and really, happy that he is an advocate for manufacturing jobs. He has a BA in economics and a minor in government from CSU Sacramento, and his EMBA 3 months ago, according to his LinkedIn photo, from Sacramento State as well. Without further ado, Lance Hastings.
There we go. I'll take. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I guess what you do during COVID is you go back to school and earn your MBA, which is what I did over the last 15 months. So it's been an interesting journey. Now, the reason I did that, went back to school, is because I think it was really important that we really understand what we're doing. And while I have an economics degree, there's a lot about marketing and accounting and other things that are hallmarks of a good leader. And I wanted to be a good leader of CMTA, not so much for myself, but more for the staff, the team, and the industry sector that I have the opportunity to represent. And having said that, I know this is the foundation of this conference is energy. Who's in the energy sector in the room? Please raise your hand. Okay, very good number there. Who's in the manufacturing sector? Okay, we got a few. Who's in distribution? All right, and who's a consumer? All right, so I think we got everybody. Everybody in the room is part of the manufacturing ecosystem, because if we didn't make it, you wouldn't be able to buy it. But if we didn't have the inputs, we also wouldn't be able to make it. And I think the panelists that we're going to bring up here in a few minutes and some of the observation I'm going to make is really going to talk about how important the manufacturing sector is to the economy and how misunderstood the manufacturing sector is. Because I think a lot of us rely on the Hollywood portrayal of manufacturing where it's dirty, dark, and dangerous and everybody's sweating all day long. That is simply not the case. And you don't have to go very far into a manufacturing facility to observe the contrary. And I hope you all know that October is Manufacturing Month, and October 7th was Manufacturing Day in America. And a lot of manufacturers opened their doors for the community to come in and actually see what is going on. And what warms my heart isn't so much the parents that are coming into the room or the manufacturing facilities or even the adults, it's the kids. Because they come into a manufacturing facility eyes wide open. And we need to nurture that and encourage that, not because, well, everyone needs to go in manufacturing workforce, but everyone can. And we need levels of employment, levels of education, levels of experience, and levels of skill that makes manufacturing unique. There is no other industry sector that can feed an entire swath of the workforce like manufacturing can. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes before we bring up the guest to give a background on the state of manufacturing in California. And I've been in this role for 4 years, and it's always been good, not great. And one of these days, I'm going to be able to come in front of a group and say how great manufacturing is, but a lot of that relies on me and my organization to flip the narrative about manufacturing so people understand what it really means. What I'd like to share a couple of facts about manufacturing here in California. We are the #1 state in manufacturing output, jobs, and number of manufacturers, but we should be, because we're the biggest state. We have 39 million people. We better be #1 in that regard. But 64% of those manufacturers are small to medium, and that is the lifeblood of the sector, not the names that you may recognize, but it's the ones that you don't, that are in your communities and employing people at great wages. The diversity of our sector, too, is worth noting. 30% of our workforce is diverse, and 31% is women. Both figures need to increase, and quickly, in order for us to meet the demands of the future in workforce. But California, the reason I say is good, not great, we're not keeping pace with the 49 other states in terms of investment per capita, and that's where it's relevant. California is the biggest state, so the best way to equalize across the country is look at per capita figures. And I'm embarrassed to say that California investment is $1.60, $1.6 per person investment in manufacturing. I don't know how you guys feel. Does this sound good, bad? What do you think my next number is going to be? In the US, so as a national average, $100 per person. Okay, so we're 1% of that. And the winner, ironically, was mentioned just a moment ago, South Carolina. $430 per person is being invested in manufacturing in that state. So we need to reverse some trend lines so that we can continue to be the #1. But I think a lot of the basis for that is the job growth rate. So in the US, it's 10% growth rate, which is fantastic for any industry sector. California, though, is 2.1%. So as a state, we're growing, which is good, but only at 2%. But the dog that wags the tail is south of here, on the other side of the grapevine. Los Angeles County job growth rate is in the negative. So to be polite, that's dragging the rest of the state down. So if we could focus regionally, particularly in the Southland, and reverse some of those trends, or at least stop the bleeding, California would not only maintain our rightful spot as the #1 manufacturing state, but certainly solidify it well into the future. And real happy to be here. I'm going to pivot here in just a minute. The San Joaquin Valley Manufacturing Alliance was mentioned a minute ago. They have their meeting next week. There are approximately 40 regional manufacturing groups in California. And I talked about the ecosystem a minute ago with all of you in the room, but it's really that those 40 organizations and ours, and CMTC as a partner, that is the engagement arm of the manufacturing sector. So I hope that you can support your regional manufacturing groups because they need all the help that we can deliver to them. So I'm going to bring up the panelists right now. If they could start making their way up. John O'Donnell from Rondo Energy, please come up and join us on the stage. Umar Javed from Watt EV, and Anthony Williams from Amazon. I think Bakersfield's favorite son here today. So now I get to pivot now and just become a moderator, but I think you'll find out over the course of the next bit of time, I'm not moderate about anything when it comes to manufacturing. Very passionate about what I stand for and what I represent. And yes, I worked in beer for a while. And ironically, beer needs to be made, so it's manufactured, but just happens to be a product that a lot of people, in fact, enjoy. And I'm going to, as I turn it over to the panel, I'm going to leave a provocative thought in the room, and then one that will probably come up in the course of conversation with the three wonderful people up here. I think California is at the precipice of making a public policy decision that's going to affect literally the rest of all of our lives. And that's how we're going to treat the manufacturing sector and those that emit greenhouse gases. And there's a lot of talk in Sacramento about, net zero, and there's not a lot of talk about none. But we're at that precipice where there's going to need to be a policy decision made. Are we going to be able to emit and mitigate or not emit any longer? And I think having this conference and the Economic Summit here in Bakersfield over the next several days is really going to bring that conversation to the fore, because it has to happen. We've all been talking past each other for the last 5 to 10 years, and now it's really time for some real candid and perhaps courageous discussions among all of the stakeholders. And from our perspective of manufacturing, we are willing to do that and sit at the table. So with that, I will get off my soapbox. I'm going to turn over first to John O'Donnell from Rondo Energy. He's got a couple of slides that if I buy some time, they'll come up on the screen. And each of them are going to introduce themselves and their companies, and then we're going to get right to it with some good questions.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with you. I've been working at the intersection of industry and energy for a long time, and I think of Kern County, California as like a poster child, the core of that intersection. I look at Kern County. I built my first solar energy project, a pilot of a first-of-a-kind, fundamentally new technology 14, 15 years ago. There's a facility at 99 in Kimberlina Road that I built. That technology went on around the world to build hundreds of megawatts. Later in 2011, I built a prototype of another technology that was another solar energy technology and a first prototype of a new energy storage technology. That was working with Berry Petroleum, looking at using solar energy to power heavy oil production. That's an interesting link, that Kern County has been a place where energy has been the core of the economy back to the 19th century. Fundamental revolutions in energy technology in the middle of the 20th century completely gave Kern County another 60 plus years, 100 years perhaps, in its energy resources when technologies for steam injection were developed. And then those technologies made a switch from using oil to using gas as a new energy source came into the picture. And today, of course, Kern County is an energy superpower with the largest wind farm in the country, some of the absolutely best solar energy resources, and some of the largest solar projects in the county and the country. And there's a group I'm working with in Europe who said, why is all the heavy industry on the coast? It's because it was where it was cheap to bring the coal. Energy, the policies around energy, the cost of energy are inextricably linked to where do we make investments in manufacturing, in other job-creating industries. And California is, a lot of folks don't know, so I'm working on one thing, a new source of heat for industrial processes that uses what's happened in wind and solar with a new energy storage technology to allow the next decade or the next century of industry to become powered at a lower cost or comparable costs to today. I think California is engaged in this historic, giant policy move that could be tremendously destructive or tremendously inspirational, driving new technologies or driving industry out of business. And however those policymakers look from a distance, I will say for one thing is for sure. They all have the goal of finding a path to decarbonize without deindustrializing. And that it may not look that way, but for sure, it's a really hard problem. This little map is every single furnace and boiler in the state of California that is in the cap-and-trade system. It's the Hilmar Cheese Company, it's Gallo Wine, it's the Frito-Lay facility out on Rosedale. It's every single facility. It's the cement plants. It's the oil refineries. California uses more natural gas. It's the second or third largest use of natural gas, more than for electric power. And the whole matter, for sure, there's been a lot of conversations about what are we going to do to comply with these changes without destroying these businesses. And we are at a moment now where intermittent electricity from wind and solar has become the lowest cost energy that humans have ever known of any source, but you can only have it a little part of the day. What do you do when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine? We have developed a new technology that we call a heat battery that lets us take that intermittent energy and deliver it continuously as high temperature heat. We're building these things called heat batteries. This one, we're engineering here in Bakersfield. We are fabricating it here in Bakersfield. We're installing it in Kern County. And the fundamental technology is intermittent electricity to high temperature heat in brick. You saw a picture of a blast furnace a moment ago. There are 300,000 megawatts of heat storage running in the world right now, been running for a couple of years, heat storage in brick at blast furnaces. Rondo's contribution was we figured out how to heat that with electricity to build units that are drop-in replacements for oil field OTSGs, refinery steam generators, food and beverage boilers, and powering cement plants, steel facilities, and others. This is a technology that we see having this creating transformative opportunities where the wind and solar resources that are here, the engineering innovation, the manufacturing history, and the experience with financing large energy facilities, we see Kern County as a key place where this technology and others like it are going to create huge opportunity over the coming years for a new infrastructure that attracts new industry here.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. And you can see that with technology, there's a lot of things on the slide. It's very impressive that you're able to turn things into something else that we didn't know that we could do. And the panel is emerging technology, which is a little bit redundant because things are emerging. It's technology that's speeding that along. So thank you very much, John.
Thanks.
Umar, would you introduce yourself and your company to the group?
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Umar Javed. I am president of Watt EV. A little bit first background on myself. About 3 years ago, actually prior to 2019, I was in aerospace industry for about 23, 24 years. And satellite communications, telecommunications, fiber optic networks, large infrastructure building. We had our own R&D facilities in California. We built satellite systems. We built satellites with Boeing, with other large manufacturers. So I come from manufacturing background, understand manufacturing importance and how it impacts the economy, local economy, and United States itself, and why we need to have a lot more manufacturing activity going on within the US borders than importing stuff from outside. 3 years back, our group decided to enter into transportation sector. The idea was to look at the bigger problem, and the bigger problem was emissions. And a major contribution comes from heavy-duty transportation sector, namely Class 8 large big rigs, if you want to call them, or semis. So Watt EV's mission became to basically, luckily not having any legacy, issues, not coming from oil and gas industry, just starting from scratch, to go build major charging stations for Class 8 trucks. And currently we have 4 stations under construction. One is very near here on Highway 65 in Bakersfield. That was our first flagship construction, 110 acres land, where we're putting basically 40 megawatt solar panel, battery bank, and concurrently we can charge 36 trucks at the same time. We have our second facility in Port of Long Beach. This is to create a route from drayage and from the import containers that are coming in and being imported and then being transported to Amazon or to Walmart, to their distribution centers. So we have created that route. The third facility is in San Bernardino, and the fourth one is in Gardena, which is close to Port of Los Angeles. The company's mission is to have, by 2026, 52 sites in California. Some will be large, like Bakersfield site. I would encourage you one day go and look at what we're doing there. All 4 sites will be up and running by end of Q1 2023. And basically, we will be then going further up north throughout Kern County on 5 Freeway, 99, all the way to Sacramento, and then to other states. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. In order to create, just the last piece of that is, we knew that building these stations is not going to be enough. There has to be an offtake on energy side, and we can't just sit and hope and wait people one day buy trucks and come and charge at our facilities. So we started our truck as a service TaaS model, where basically we go to our transporter customers, partners, and we give them trucks on a 5-year lease basis, all inclusive, a fixed price per month for them to lease trucks from us, and then they can drive those trucks on these routes. So this way we can make this ecosystem work, rather just doing one side of the equation and forgetting the other side. Thank you.
Thanks, Umar, very much. And I think that what you just heard are 2 technologies described that weren't even probably more than a thought 5 years ago, let alone 10, and yet we're talking about it today, right now from the stage. So good for both of you. And I think Anthony raised his hand for every one of the questions that I asked at the very beginning. You've been on all sides of this ecosystem from the beginning to end, but Anthony, it's great to have you here from Amazon, and I think everyone probably has something on order on its way to their house right now.
Thank you, and thank you for that. Thank you, Lance. It's always good to come home. Very, very grateful to Nicole for inviting me to participate, and for all of you for joining us and being here to talk about such an important issue and topic, particularly in this part of the state, which I know we'll get into that a little bit later. But again, I'm Anthony Williams, born and raised here in Bakersfield, a very proud West High Viking. So any Vikings in the house? Yeah. Although I come from several generations of drillers and, rebels, so, I'm sure I could spread the love around the room in terms of my family history. I work for a small internet startup. We sell books online. It's called Amazon. I'm sure you may have heard of them. I think we're going to make it. Look, I think we're all very proud of the work that we do, meeting the needs of our customers. Amazon is a company that is singularly focused on our customers and what they need. So most of you know us because you see you have the packages coming to your doorsteps every day. Probably a lot of folks. You see those vans driving around the city. You see those trucks on the freeways. And you know that you have in the palm of your hand the ability to do some impulse buying at 3 a.m. I don't recommend it, but I thank you for it. But what you may not know is that there are several other parts of what this company does. You probably don't know that we power 60% of the internet through Amazon Web Services, that we hope to entertain you through Prime Video and Amazon Studios. that we hope to supply your devices in your homes that make your life a little bit more convenient in terms of Alexa and your Ring devices and some of the other things that you probably use. I would like to say, I'm very proud to say that here in California, where we have almost 250,000 employees from Amazon, all of those things I just mentioned to you are headquartered in this state, largely. Amazon Studios being right in Culver City, where you're getting all of your content. We are the largest operations hub for Amazon. About 10% of our worldwide operations happens here in California. So this is an extremely important state for Amazon. We are larger than most countries around the world. One of my colleagues, he just recently left, but he headed Canada, Amazon Canada. And I used to joke with him that you have an entire country that is half the size of the state that I have. But it gives you the sense of the scale of how important California is to Amazon and the work that we do. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge two of my really, really extraordinary colleagues who are here with me. Sally Kay, who leads our public policy and community investment efforts in almost all of Northern California. And some of you are probably on the cusp of this in terms of your opinion, but that includes Kern County. So she is your voice at Amazon for the northern part of the state. And David Ambrose, who's my extraordinary colleague from Southern California who leads community investment in Southern California. I know we're going to get into a lot of issues, but I just want to put a point on this topic and this discussion today and how important it is that we think about how we are transitioning our energy and our capacity to become more resilient from a climate perspective. Amazon, in order to meet the needs of our customers, we know we have to participate in that. We know we have to be part of that. We have to be at the table, putting our money where our mouths are in terms of making investments and supporting that transition, because not only do our customers demand it and expect it, but we live here too. It is very important for us to be part of the solutions that we're talking about today. As a Bakersfield native, I know it's a tough conversation in a community like this. If you were, trying to put a gas station in a horse farming community, you might have had some challenges as we were transitioning from that mode of transportation to automobiles. But it's a conversation that we need to have. I am very proud to be here to have it, and thank you for your attention and joining us. Yeah.
Thanks, Anthony. This all sounds, for everybody, this all sounds well and good, these emerging technologies. It really is the wave of the future. And I'm going to turn to the panel here in a moment and ask them to describe the challenges that they face with these emerging technologies, because it's not all roses and sunshine, as you can possibly imagine. But we're having the conversation, and I'll dovetail to something that Anthony said a moment ago. We're all at the table, and we can't continue saying no to things. We have to have these very courageous conversations, and they're not going to be easy. If they were easy, everyone would be doing it, but they're important that we have here in California. As the 5th largest economy on the cusp of perhaps becoming the 4th, I don't want to be around here if it becomes the 6th. So we have this responsibility with the size of our economy to steward it in the most proper way. So John, I'll start with you on, it sounded great what you put up on the slides and everything, but what are the challenges that you're facing to make this a reality?
How long do you have?
So we have 32 hours.
All right, okay, good. Let me just touch on 3. Okay, number 1, I think regulatory uncertainty. That is true sort of for everyone. That is, to the extent that there is regulatory certainty, it can create a platform for investment where investors can be certain about the future of the facility they're investing in. And there is today, as we all know, there's regulatory uncertainty about everything from policies like cap and trade, the low carbon fuel standard. What is California's relationship with its domestic oil production? So there's those matters, regulatory uncertainty. Another is what I'll call obsolete regulations. that create other problems. Kern County, as I mentioned, it has some of the best wind and solar resources anywhere, but the average connection time, if you want to build a new solar project, it's 7.5 years now because it's been impossible to permit transmission lines from where the resource is to where the energy is needed. It's also a challenge that we have electricity tariffs that industrials experience that they were really appropriate 100 years ago, but they're not appropriate in today's world where, look, the cheese factory at noon is burning on a day in July when wholesale electricity prices are zero. They're burning natural gas to power the factory because they're not allowed to buy electricity at less than $100 a megawatt hour. That's an example of something that needs to change kind of from a regulatory standpoint. And then I guess the third goes back to those first two, which is we're in an era where there are these fundamentally new tools in the toolbox. There are these fundamentally new tools like what we're doing and a lot of other folks are doing. And there is kind of education and figuring out how do we build alliances? How do we build alliances across industry? How do we educate regulators and work together to set the policies that will enable the certainty, that will enable the investment? Those are really the big things I see. I mean, I've got some challenges. Rondo is now in manufacturing, in construction. A lot of our technology stuff is behind us of the risk. When I look forward, it's those three matters that I mentioned, and I think I'm not the only one with those challenges.
Yeah, you're not standing alone. What's interesting, it seems like regulation and legislation can't keep up with the pace of what's happening here up on the stage. So that's an important takeaway.
And I would say it's not because of ill intention, right? It's because, look, there's education to do, there's communication that we need to have. No.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in a vacuum for sure.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night, Umar?
What keeps me up is basically manufacturing. In my business and my line of business and my sector, the supply chain is very slow. The manufacturers of in other words, truck manufacturers, the way they are approaching all the supply chain and manufacturing is very slow. Their approach to technology, the state of technology that exists today and where it should be, that whole thought process is very slow. So that keeps us up. But we are fixing those ourselves. So just to give you an idea, the current state of technology requires a Class 8 truck 2 hours at least, if not more, to be fully charged. And versus, you are, I'm sure, quite familiar with that, that doesn't work in supply chain world and in transportation world. When you can go with a diesel truck and you can get over with it in 25 minutes or 20 minutes, that downtime and the regulation that the driver cannot drive more than certain hours in a 24-hour time window. So this needs to come down to 20 minutes, 25 minutes, megawatt charging. You go talk to manufacturers of, I don't want to name names, but any big brand name, they will tell you, yeah, it will come, but nobody tells you what is the true timeline for that. So at WattEV, what we have done, we just can't sit and wait for others to do something. So we have started with the current state of technology, our initial depots and initial trucks, and our goal is to, by 2025, start introducing megawatt charging and start working with certain manufacturers to start offering to our customers megawatt charging capable trucks as well. So our approach is the same approach in aerospace world. You have a big problem, or a small problem, doesn't matter. You just can't sit and cry. You need to take things in your own hands, work with the industry, work with your partners who are willing and capable of supporting you. And we have great support from California Energy Commission, other government agencies, private sector, all the way to European agencies that are involved in creating standards and so forth. So challenges will always be there. I think most important thing is that you have to stay on course and continue making progress towards your goal.
Yeah, remaining undeterred is really the key, I think, to all of it. Anthony, what are some challenges you guys, with your diverse portfolio at Amazon?
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think it it builds upon what's already been said, which is that we made a commitment to get to net zero carbon by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of the Paris Climate Accord. Question is, how do you do that when you don't have all the technologies available at scale to make that happen? And we now have 375, I think, other companies that have joined that pledge. So, if we fail, we will fail miserably. So there is a real commitment to, making that happen. But it's also not waiting for it to happen, right? It is trying to figure that out. I mean, you mentioned, the issues around, as you probably know, California Air Resources Board, this is top of mind for me because I was pulled over on the road on the way to deal with this issue, are, imposing requirements in terms of advanced clean fleets. And how do the requirements that they're putting in place and the timelines are going to be a challenge to meet, but we have to do it. And, so we've made these commitments. We are well on our way to meeting them, but the challenge is how do you get there when you can't really see it right in front of you? You can't just go out and purchase electric vehicles that don't exist, that have the range that you need. You can't do it if you want to build the sustainable buildings that are much more energy efficient using concrete that is, of a higher technological composition when that doesn't exist yet. So in addition to making the pledge to be net zero carbon by 2040, we, through the Global Climate Fund that Amazon created, are investing billions of dollars in new technology startup companies. So again, it's about putting your money where your mouth is and saying, we're going to get there, but we're also going to help make it happen. We are the largest purchaser of renewable energy now as a company. A lot of that renewable energy, by the way, is purchased right here in Kern County, is produced rather right here in Kern County. And there will be a need for more of that. So some of the investments that we're making in companies, and the purchases that we're making will, again, hope to spur this sort of economic development and this sort of transition that I think will be needed for regions like Kern County around the state and, frankly, around the country. And just, I would also just say that, as we look at, other modes or mechanisms that we'll be able to use, so renewable energy being one of them, transportation being another. Again, here in California, we just launched the largest, tractor truck charging facility in the United States in Tracy, California, just north of here. Just north of here. I get confused because I was up in Sacramento and I came down here. I live in Huntington Beach. But anyway, these are important investments, and creating that ecosystem, particularly within inland California, as I like to say, moving away from, the coastal areas where you don't have the capacity to do it. You don't have the land to build the solar that needs to be built here in California. I'm really excited to hear your presentation about the batteries and to be able to do storage, because that's going to be another huge, factor in how we are able to deliver on this. So I've talked a little bit about some of the technological challenges, some of the availability challenges. There are also policy challenges that we hope we could continue to work through. There have been obviously some promising moves that have been made, but we know more work needs to be done there too.
Great, thanks, Anthony. It sounds like and I don't remember where I heard this phrase, but bring the future forward faster.
Right.
And we probably have all heard that in some iteration or the other. This velocity of technology that we're experiencing right now in our lives is unprecedented. And there's one thing to say that industry by itself is going to get there because we're very innovative and technologically focused. But there's the government that says, well, you better get there, and I'm going to give you a time frame that you may or may not be able to meet. So instead of that binary approach to things, where industry can do it or the government will tell us to do it, let's meet somewhere in the middle and have that conversation, because I remain convinced, and you picked up on a theme of what I've been saying, we're talking past each other right now at a time where it's more critical that we talk together. And I couldn't have said the same thing maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, because the conversation was a little bit different. But now in particular, 2022, with all the modes of communication that are available, all the forums, notwithstanding the interruptions of COVID, we have the capacity to have those conversations. We're just not doing it. And that's something I really want to call upon all of us in the room and those of us up on the stage that have something to do about it to really have those conversations. So you all surfaced really important issues. So somewhat related to that, we've identified some of the challenges that you have. If you had the magic wand, and one of us up here has the ear of the governor whenever he needs to, if you had a magic wand and the opportunity to talk to not only the governor, but leaders in the public policy arena, what would that look like? And don't bind yourselves by any preconception about how you engage with government. Magic wand, top leaders, you have an audience. This is the lightning round. John, you go.
Once again, how much time do we have?
20 hours.
Before I answer your question, you mentioned about the future. Someone said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And the question is, where do these advances happen first? But to answer your question, we are at this moment. You talked about this dialogue that we want to have, right? And I mentioned regulatory certainty, creating a climate for investment certainly means with new technologies, finding ways to support new technologies when the technology is not yet widely understood, when it still has remaining risks or perceived risks. Finding ways to encourage the manufacturing and deployment of those technologies. And, there can be a mix of carrots and sticks. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act has just created some massive carrots, some massive support for emerging technologies in energy storage, in wind and solar, in carbon capture and sequestration. A lot of things that we need in the toolkit. But as I said, the things that I'd want to request is actually something like what you said is, let's get together a group and let's identify what are the right now obstacles. And they are, in California, there's work we need to do at CAISO, at the PUC, all the way to individual county level permitting processes. I would call out Kern County as absolutely being in the vanguard of addressing those. And asking, okay, what are the things that we can start to get steel in the ground with some of these new technologies where the early movers recognize that they won't be punished for moving early, right? That they'll ultimately be rewarded. And we are at this moment of transition to a world where, look, we can have lower cost energy infrastructure, a lot of it here, a lot of new manufacturing that's seeking large-scale clean energy supply, because again, we have the primary resource here, but as you can see, that wasn't a short enough answer, or a complete enough answer. Yeah.
Well, I'm hearing too that we may be trying to explore a post-grid California economy by some of the technologies there. They do still rely on the grid to get to some of these points, but that may be what we're kind of contemplating here down the road. So Magic Wand, we'll pass over to you, Amar.
So I agree with you pretty much everything you said. I think along the same lines. I think if I had a magic wand and the audience that you have, the ears that you have, I don't, its regulatory environment needs to be reassessed, definitely in so many different ways. Red tape, things that take too much time because of bureaucratic process. Utilities, they work with you, but they don't work at your, they don't work with, there's no speed of light, I think, in their dictionary. And it just delays anything you try to do in a timely fashion and try to meet certain timelines and certain governmental timelines itself. But you just can't get them done because there's so much red tape. Things have become better. I wouldn't say that things are not happening. Things do happen. But it's just very cumbersome process. Incentives, subsidies, all those things are very good. I understand that. But I think more important thing is the sense of urgency. Just the way they have a sense of urgency, putting deadlines that by 2025 or by 2030 or 40, you have to meet certain zero emission goals and so forth. They need to also, at the same time, then turn their machinery into much rapid speed so that it conforms with the timelines. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Umar.
Yep.
And Anthony, wave the wand.
it's always interesting to kind of have been on sort of both sides of it. When I worked for the governor, although I've sat next to him when he acted on close to 6,000 bills, and I'm not sure how much he listened to me when that happened, so I'm certainly not sure how much he'd listen to me now. But, you know, I think, I mean, this has already been mentioned, but I mean, the tailwinds are pretty good overall in terms of policies that have already been put into place and that are being, you know, acted on, you know, even as recently as the Inflation Reduction Act. You got the low carbon fuel standards that are driving innovation in a positive way. Even the infrastructure bill that was passed had massive investments in green technology. So the headwinds are there. I think what concerns us, again, is what they are pushing up against in sort of some of the pushback. And this can be, you know, if you want to call it blame or not, but this is not just a left and right issue. It's not a carbon-based economy, folks, versus the environmentalists. Both, you know, everyone has, you know, shares some blame in why we're not able to move fast enough when you have the capability and the, resources to generate, you know, substantial solar in Kern County, but you get a state law that prevents you and regulations that prevent you from doing that in a fast way. That's a problem. And trying to balance some of those issues in terms of our, you know, environmental demands that, you know, impose trade-offs on both sides. And so it's really just about, seeing where we want to go and looking past our immediate, you know, challenges and working towards getting there. I like to think that in the private sector, where we are consumers of energy, that obviously we have a role to play, and I talked about how we're doing that, but we also need to be at the table to encourage that movement to continue in terms of policies that are in place and getting people to think longer and thinking a little bit differently about it. You know, it's just like we are here at this, we're all sort of kind of frankly lucky. It's painful at times, but to be on the hinges of change, where we are moving towards a different source of energy to power our lives. You know, I mean, we've done it before. I mentioned, you know, the horse farmer in the horse farming community being pushed to allow for gas stations. I mean, get a horse was the refrain that people would say, you know, when cars came along and they were being driven on roads that weren't designed for them, and by people who didn't know what the hell they were doing, frankly, no laws or regulations and, you know, things like that were, you know, and so it was hard. But imagine if we hadn't done it. What would our economy be like today? We have the capacity to adapt and do what's needed from a policy standpoint, from how we are adapting our lives and how we are adapting our work. I was really encouraged by the earlier panels. You know, our educators are ready. They are ready to educate the next generation, and not just in terms of age. I mean, some people will change careers, but they are at the ready to prepare people for this for this new economy and what we're doing. So, and again, that's what makes it all the more exciting to be here in Kern County, where, you know, you might assume that you might not be having this conversation, and yet we are. So we have the opportunity to lead, to show policymakers at the state, federal, and other local levels that it can be done if we think hard about it, get through some pain points, and get to where we need to get.
Thanks, Anthony.
Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
I mean, our ability to imagine the possible, I think, has been accelerated. It was that velocity component that I mentioned a bit ago. We're thinking faster because our future is, in fact, coming faster. We're going to wrap up the formal part of the program. If you have a burning question, kind of prepare yourself.
Hey, Lance,
Nicole.
we have from the one regulator in the room, our CEC Commissioner, Vice Chair, Siva Gunda had a comment.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Just wanted to respond to the conversation. Extremely helpful, and I think we've heard them in the forums, and I think a couple of things I took away, that the change is coming, and we need to make sure we are accelerating to that future. but also thinking through, I think, a few barriers that you all mentioned in terms of regulatory certainty. And I think that keeps coming in the conversations. The need for ensuring flexibility for emerging technologies. It's attribute driven. So once you provide a solution, as long as you're within the attributes of a solution, you're good, versus we constantly move around technologies. So just wanted to say, hear you, extremely important conversation, and we are sensitized to this discussion and looking forward to engaging with all of you. And thank you for the work you're doing. Thanks.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony, you didn't know he was in the room, huh?
That's great.
Where is she? Just a couple of closing comments, and then if you have questions, Bernie, just kind of get the attention of Nicole. A couple things to wrap up. Scale, really important. We talked about Kern County, how important it is to the state of California, how important it is to the Central Valley, but how important it is to the entire operation. California, there's not an inland and a coastal California. There's not a northern and a southern, although that's up for debate today, depending upon where we are. There are like 20 Californias. And the scale where we all live on any given day, we don't venture too far from our homes on any given day. Anthony and I drove down 4 hours to get here today. When I lived in Virginia, if I drove 4 hours and there was no traffic, I could cross 6 states in that 4 hours with no traffic. So that's our north-south scale. But California is huge. And sometimes we lose sight of what that scale means. So if we can all kind of recapture what 39 million people means, and the needs that they have from an economic standpoint, from an educational standpoint, housing standpoint, et cetera, then I think we'll better be able to grapple really what California's future looks like. Thanks to Rich for the introduction, the observation, with the great work that he's doing here in Kern. Yes, CMTA has been around since 1918, but I was not there at its founding. Just want to dispel that. But we added technology to our name. We used to be CMA, just like the California Medical Association. So you'd be in the Capitol and say, I'm from CMA, and they'd say, which one? But we recognized 20 years ago that we needed to really more broadly represent who we stood for, so we added the word technology to our name, which I think was very forward-looking. And I'm going to close with thanking Nicole for having us
We have
up
one
here.
more question in the back, and then
Okay.
go ahead and close.
We'll get to you in a minute, G. We're just going to close with, I think California is on the cusp of continued greatness. And if you break that down, the cusp implies you're moving from one state to another state, but we're on that always. And we have an obligation as Californians, from wherever we come from, to continue that California dream that I like to call the California promise. It shouldn't be a dream anymore after 170 years. So with that, I'm going to close. Thank you, Nicole, for putting
one more
us
question,
together.
Lance, in the
No,
back.
I'm going to close. I'm done. G, what have you got?
Thank you very much. I was listening, and I have listened and talked to many of the industrial manufacturing in the Central Valley. One of the things which may be a solution, but don't take that as a joke, is that we need to have expiration date for any regulation we make. It could be a 10-year, 5-year, because we make regulations, we never go back and review them if they're even applicable today in today's environment. So it'd be good for us to think legislatively. Any OSHA, any regulation, we need to set an expiration date where legislation come back and they review that with the new feedback from industry. Is it really applicable in today's environment or not? That's the one thought I just had I want to share.
Thanks, Gurminder. Appreciate that. One of the first people I met when I took my role, I went down, I think we're north of Fresno. I met G, and we've had a great friendship ever since.
Right, great. Thank you so much.
Wait,
yes.
Nicole, Lance, if you don't mind, if I can just point of personal privilege to thank our great mayor,
recognized for that purpose.
Karen Go, who is not only the greatest mayor in California, but probably in the country. I love you. Thank you so much for being such a good steward for our city here.
Of course. Thank you so much to this panel. Thank you, wonderful. Thank you, Lance Hastings.